Welcome back to the David Pakman Show. I'm producer Pat Ford filling in for David today. He is on vacation and will be back at the end of the week. In response to the mass shooting that took place in Tennessee a couple of weeks back, Republicans who are in control of the state legislature have decided to take action, but not in any sort of substantive way, not by strengthening background checks or banning certain types of weapons. Instead, they've decided to expel two members of the legislative body who took part in the protest and essentially broke the rules of decorum in the legislative body in so doing. Tennessee lawmakers expelled two members from the state legislature, Justin Jones and Justin Pearson, after they and a third member, Gloria Johnson, took part in a protest against gun violence from the floor of the chamber. The vote took place last Thursday, with Johnson surviving expulsion by only a single vote. Notably, Jones and Pearson are black, whereas Johnson, the one who survived the expulsion vote, is white. I'll leave it up to you to decide whether that has anything to do with the results. Following the mass shooting, there was a protest at the legislative chamber to try to get lawmakers to do anything at all about this issue of gun violence, and using their position as representatives to be actually inside the House chamber, these three lawmakers used a bullhorn and temporarily disrupted the official business of the legislative body, leading the Republican supermajority to call for a recess. Let's take a look at some of the video of the protests taking place.
So thank you for being here. Thank all of your colleagues for being here. You are being heard and listened to, and you will not be
Now, after this happened, Republicans, who hold a large majority of seats, immediately pledged a rapid response. They stripped Johnson and Jones of committee assignments. I don't believe Pearson yet had any committee assignments. Motions to expel the three from the legislature were introduced by three different members of the state legislature on April 3rd, accusing the trio of disorderly behavior. Now, to put this in context, it's very rare for expulsions to take place in the Tennessee legislature. Just 8 lawmakers have been expelled from the House in the state's history. 6 of those were Confederates who were expelled in the 19th century for refusing to affirm the citizenship of formerly enslaved black people. In the 20th century, a legislator was expelled after being convicted of bribery. And most recently, in 2016, a member was expelled for sexual misconduct. So this expulsion wasn't really about the merits. It only happened because Republicans had the votes to be able to do it, and they took advantage of that. And in fact, Justin Jones, one of the 2 ousted members, highlighted in a speech that he gave on the floor some of the things that his fellow members of the legislature did over the years, or at least were accused of doing, that did ultimately not result in an expulsion. Let's take a look at him talking about that.
Let's talk about expulsion. For years, one of your colleagues who was an admitted child molester sat in this chamber. No expulsion. One member sits in this chamber who was found guilty of domestic violence. No expulsion. We had a former speaker sit in this chamber who is now under federal investigation. No expulsion. We have a member still under federal investigation. No expulsion. We had a member pee in another member's chair in this chamber. No expulsion. In fact, they're in leadership.
Now, the hope is that from a political standpoint, this will backfire on Republicans, because not only has this brought the issue of gun violence more to the forefront and how members of Congress at the state and federal level aren't really doing anything about it, it's also made these 3 national figures, the Tennessee Three as they're now being called. Vice President Kamala Harris visited the lawmakers in Nashville on Friday, and President Biden also spoke with the 3 via conference call, inviting them to visit the White House. Now, to be clear, I don't know if disrupting proceedings and using a bullhorn is the right way to go about protesting this sort of matter, despite it being peaceful, of course, and despite it being clearly intended to only be a temporary disruption. And that's because if, let's say, the shoe was on the other foot, let's say, at the Capitol, we saw Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert do this exact same thing on one of the issues that they care about. Would we be totally fine with it? I'm not sure. And I just want to stay consistent on this, right? Nevertheless, I think that expulsion would be way too extreme if that was to take place. I think the most appropriate thing to do in that sort of instance would be maybe a censure, right? Because these people were duly elected to represent their constituents, and barring some sort of extreme event, they should be able to serve out their term. So I think censuring them, which is basically just an official condemnation, would have made a lot more sense for something like this, breaking the rules of decorum. But Republicans in this situation, they were just trying to abuse their power and be vindictive on this matter. And then final point I want to make on this, some on the right are comparing this to January 6th, when there's absolutely no comparison to be drawn here to the Capitol insurrection. On that day, January 6, 2021, we saw rioters beating up cops. We saw the Senate chamber get overtaken. We saw several people die based on, because of what happened. It was directed and then not put a stop to by the then president of the United States. And the intent of the protest that became a riot was to overthrow the government, to end democracy in the United States. This, on the other hand, was a peaceful protest that was, sure, at times a little rowdy, but there was no intention of overthrowing the government. There was no clear acts of violence, and it was not intended to end democracy in the state of Tennessee. So spare me those comparisons. It will be interesting to see what happens next, and Pearson and Jones, the two who were expelled from the legislature, will be able to run for their seats again. Let's hope that they're able to win back their seats, and then all will be good.
It's April, which means Earth Month is here. This is the time to consider the products you buy and the impact they have on our planet. So if you're still using conventional toilet paper in your home, there's no better time to switch to Real's 100% bamboo toilet paper. 30 million trees are destroyed every year for toilet paper in the U.S. alone. Real Paper makes toilet paper from 100% bamboo stalks, which grow forever, no cutting down trees. So when you use Real, it doesn't feel like you're sacrificing anything to help the earth. Real Paper is soft and fluffy the way you're used to. It's always shipped free to my door in plastic-free packaging. I can schedule it on a subscription if I want. And Real is partnered with One Tree Planted, and with every box of Real Paper you buy, they fund reforestation efforts across the country. Make a positive change this Earth Month. Go to realpaper.com/Pacman. Use code Pacman for 30% off and free shipping. The link is down below.